Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about SV which is, what I really should be talking about most of the time, but I find ways to not do that. But today we're going to be talking about a DOU controversy that hasn't really been discussed too much in the last year, but it kind of surrounds, like, tiering policy, doubles, and more specifically, two separate instances which the general popular will was usurped by some grand Smogon overlords. This is an exaggeration. Um, who decided that what they thought was more important than the people who actually played the metagame thought. So we're of course talking about Dondozo Tatsugiri, grouping those together. They're the same thing, really. And then Dark Void and Darkrai. So today I just figured I'd talk about both instances, and talk about why I think, like, DOU kind of needs its own, like, separate, like, kind of tiering structure, or, like, well, not structure, but because in 99% of cases, like, tiering with the Smogon rules is fine, and the Smogon rules are generally well rehearsed, except for a few edge cases, which have been coming up more and more because of the way, like, Game Freak and Pokemon have decided to, like, prioritize, like, competitive doubles, I think, in the terms of the way Mon's been designed. And this is kind of just like a example of this, I guess. But generally, I think, like, DOU needs to have, like, its own, like, kind of framework, at least for these, like, a couple of specific doubles, like, interactions. And that's kind of like what we're talking about today. So to get started, let's talk about Dondozu Tatsugiri and Commander. So this is certainly something. So if you play VGC, you know what Commander does. Commander is Tatsugiri's exclusive ability. When Tatsugiri switches into battle, it gives, like, the Dondozo on its team, like, a +2 Omni boost. And then the Tatsugiri goes inside Dondozo's mouth, can't be hit by attacks, can only take damage from stuff like Sticky Barb or, like, Toxic Orb, basically. And then, like, if you target the Tatsugiri, your attacks just miss. So this is something that's been around in VGC for a while. It's basically found a way to see some kind of success in every, like, VGC format we've had this generation. And in DOU, when you get to, like, have 6 Pokemon on your team all the time, it was very, very easily abusable. One of the most broken things we had legal this generation, to the point that it was quick banned, like, 2 or 3 weeks into SV. It hasn't really been touched since because, like, the general public does not really want to see it back, I'd say. There's, like, some support for, like, a suspect down, which would be kind of interesting, but it's kind of just, like, a little bit uncompetitive. So the question arises when you try to, like, deal with the issue, what do you actually ban? So to break it down, there's 3 options here. Dondozo is the Pokemon that's actually benefiting from the boost, the Pokemon that's doing the sleeping, the Pokemon that's stalling, the Pokemon that's ruining your day, the Pokemon that's, like, making you, like, never play DOU again, never play VGC again, whatever, right? So that's the Pokemon that's actually abusing the interaction, right? And then there's Tatsugiri. So Tatsugiri, the first part about it is obviously itself, right? So Tatsugiri, when paired with Dondozo, it's using Commander, it gets, like, the Commander proc, and it's what's enabling Dondozo. And this, full disclosure, is what is actually banned in DOU. Not Dondozo, not the Pokemon that is, like, actually causing the problems, but Tatsugiri, the one that's enabling Dondozo to be, like, used in this way. Dondozo is, like, occasionally seen every so often, just, like, with the traits it has, like, Unaware, and just being a water type, because there's not really that many water types in SV, at least not good water types. And so Tatsugiri is what's banned, and that's what enables Dondozo to, like, do what it does. However, more specifically, it's not Tatsugiri itself, it's Tatsugiri's ability, which only Tatsugiri has, and which generally people could kind of clearly see is the reason why this whole interaction is stupid in the first place, right? Like, if you don't have Tatsugiri's ability Commander, you don't have Dondozo Tatsugiri, the whole interaction is like, it doesn't come up ever because the only way to use it is Commander. And you can use both Pokemon in DOU, minimal collateral damage, perfect, right? However, except that's not how it works, according to Smogon. So, a general overview of how tiering works, right? Smogon is divided into tiers, such as like OU, the standard singles metagame. There's like Ubers, another singles metagame, right? So you have all these singles tiers. However, the kind of like outlier in the way Smogon works is obviously DOU, right? It's the one doubles format that is an official Smogon metagame, which is great. Everyone in DOU likes that. That's perfect. However, it does mean that occasionally there are certain like restrictions on like the way DOU can be like tiered, right? So when it comes to tiering, tiers like have pretty much like 99% like complete autonomy, right? You get to decide what to suspect, what to ban on, or what to ban, what to vote on, etc. However, it all has to be done in a way that is kind of aligns with like Smogon's broader quote-unquote tiering policy, right? So tiering policy is kind of like a vague, like loosely used, thrown around term that's used all the time. Generally in like the context of stuff like this, where like there's a controversy and like there are multiple ways to like tackle an issue, and like one of them is Smogon approved and one of them is not Smogon approved. So broadly, Smogon tiering policy goes something like this, right? If there's problematic element that is on multiple Pokemon, such as like a move, an ability, or an item, you can ban it, right? However, if like only one thing has that like component, right? So in the case of Commander, only Tatsugiri has it, right? Since it only has that one ability, since that ability is only on one Pokemon, Tatsugiri has two abilities. Since Commander is only on Tatsugiri, you cannot ban Commander because you do not technically know whether Commander is broken or Tatsugiri is broken, right? And so this leads to the situation of like you ban the Pokemon rather than the thing that actually is making the Pokemon broken. You could kind of separate it from the Pokemon because, I mean, okay, in the case of Tatsugiri in particular, Commander is like the only reason that like Tatsugiri is used. The only thing it does. Tatsugiri is not being used in this interaction for anything but Commander. Tatsugiri is coming in, Commander is activating, the Pokemon basically goes away until Dondozo gets knocked out, and then it comes back and is like the most useless Pokemon on the entire like game state, right? Because it's not a strong Pokemon. The only thing it has is this ability. Basically, everyone and their mother can see that Tatsugiri is not the actual thing that's making it broken. It's the ability that Tatsugiri has. However, according to Smogon's tiering policy, we had to ban Tatsugiri and not Commander. And so that's what happened. So that kind of, this question, this thread was actually made before Tatsugiri was even banned. But that question is kind of like what led to this thread that I'm viewing right now. Made by one of the best like DOU posters of like the time I've been around Smogon, Idol. And so this post is pretty in-depth. I don't think I really have time to like go over like all of it or anything. But generally, it's talking about how Dondozo, for one, could also be banned. Tatsugiri could be banned, but Commander is the one that most people want in the DOU community, especially at the time when this was a sensitive topic. There were only a couple people that were advocating for like Tatsugiri specifically to be banned and not Commander. And I think like two of those were the tier leaders at the time. So that was like obviously the stance they had, and their hands were a little bit tied because obviously the tier leaders want what's best for the tier and do not want to get involved with controversy like with like the tiered admins, who like kind of oversee like everything Tyrion related. So this thread was kind of just proposing the question of like, well, what do you do? Like, we have this element that's only on one Pokemon. However, we can like pretty clearly tell that it's the only reason that this Pokemon is broken. And also, it's a double specific interaction. Like, this is not something that would really come up in like singles, because this is an interaction between two Pokemon. This was something that was unprecedented at the time. Like a double specific double specific interactions are not like new, but this was like unprecedented in like the depth of the mechanic, right? Like, this ability is completely useless in singles. Only comes into effect in doubles. And it's a specific interaction between two Pokemon in a way that we've like never seen before. Like, the only other things between like two specific like Pokemon I can think of are like Fusion Bolt and Fusion Flare, which are like obviously like dupers only, and the Pokemon they're on are not even good. It's not the weak interaction. However, this is like a strong interaction, right? So that's what this thread was about, right? And so a large number of people from the DOU community weighed in. And people not from the DOU community, at least not in the last like decade, weighed in as well. So this was obviously kind of controversial, right? So all in all, a lot of people weighed in. General DOU community consensus was like, Commander is broken, but the interaction is broken, so we gotta solve it anyway. Like, in the end, like, regardless of how you feel about Commander or Tatsugiri, like, everyone knew that the interaction was broken in some capacity and it needed to not be legal. And so in the end, the Smogon like way of doing it won out, right? Tatsugiri was banned despite like not being that good a Pokemon to begin with, right? And so this left like a little bit of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth. But it's not that big a deal. Like, it's just Tatsugiri, but it was more like the kind of quest thing. Like, really, you don't trust us to make like an educated decision on a Pokemon that like has very minimal use outside of its ability. And so it's kind of frustrating to feel like something like this is happening to your tier or the tier that you play, because it just doesn't seem right, like in any capacity. Like, this happens in like singles metagames too, of course. But this like kind of policy interaction is very, very exclusive to doubles because of the nature of the thing in question, right? So it kind of felt stupid that we're like tiering this based on like Smogon rules that are primarily intended for singles. And there probably should be some like kind of alternate like tiering addendum to like cover situations like this in doubles, where like there's an interaction between two Pokemon, there's a specific ability that partners with another Pokemon that is broken, because in this instance, right, like the Pokemon itself is not doing anything. It's just entirely the ability complementing the other Pokemon, right? And to be honest, it would have made more sense to just like ban Dondozo than to ban Tatsugiri, in my opinion, because like that was the thing that was doing things. Like, I don't know. It felt like a very counterintuitive decision. And so this went through a whole bunch of things. Including, it was actually brought up somewhere along here that like Tatsugiri is like technically 3 forms, which is like kind of offshoots the idea that like it's only one Pokemon, Commander is only on one Pokemon, etc., right? Tatsugiri actually has 3 forms that like are used for different things too, right? Like, they completely change the way the Pokemon plays in some ways, right? Because like you run defense boost, you're running body press, you have to change your set. Okay, so what the forms do is like it changes like what Dondozo's order up attack does. Like, I think the orange Tatsugiri form, like you boost your attack. The yellow one you boost your speed, and like the pink one you boost your defense. And so those were like actually like pretty significant like differences in terms of the way it played. So Fangame actually brought up that, like, hey, this is, like, kind of 3 Pokemon, if you think about it. Like, Commanders, all 3 of these sets are broken. Why can't we just say, hey, I mean, clearly Commander is the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what the Tatsugiri is doing. Like, the interaction is broken regardless, right? However, this ended up getting shot down. Here's a pretty good post by Gen 1 going over the differences. This is not grounds for treating them as different mons. Total BS, in my opinion. Like, come on. Like, the only reason this was brought up was because it seemed like a very stupid, like, case of shoving, like, this policy down the throats of the DOU community. And so then Yoda came in, one of the tier leaders, basically said, we gotta ban Tatsugiri, blah, 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 blah. Commander is inseparable from Tatsugiri. It is the signature ability of Tatsugiri. No other Pokemon naturally has it, and you can't pass it around with the likes of Skill Swap or Trace either, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I don't know. This does not read very well for me. Like, the Tatsugiri is doing nothing in these games. Anyways, I'm getting a little bit too hung up on this specific instance, right? But the end of the story is, like, Tatsugiri was banned. Commander should have been banned. Most people thought it should have been banned. Didn't happen. And, well, I feel very stupid. So, this whole thread ran its course, right? Nothing happened, basically, except saying the tier data is coming in. Well, what the tier leaders did was right. You should have banned Tatsugiri like you did. You can't ban Commander. And again, this just felt very disingenuous and silly. So, you know, kind of dumb. Okay, so after this, everyone kind of forgot about this controversy. Not that significant. In the grand scheme of things, didn't have to deal with this stupidity anymore. However, this is when it gets really stupid. So, we're going to need some context here, right? So, the DLC 1 came out for Scarlet and Violet, and it brought back a certain Pokemon that you may know called Darkrai. And what does Darkrai do? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, what Darkrai does is it uses Dark Void, right? Which, historically, one of the dumbest moves ever in the game. It's a spread sleep move. Used to have 80% accuracy. Incredibly broken. Smeargle would run it. It was very stupid. Darkrai could also run it. So it's on 2 Pokemon. Great. We can ban Dark Void. And that's what we did. That's what we did in Gen 6. Dark Void is banned. Everyone is happy because it's entirely uncompetitive. No one wants to play against that. However, unfortunately for the Smogon side of things got complicated because, well, Smogon is not the only thing that happened. So, in VGC 2016, Smeargle would spam Dark Void a lot, and it was very uncompetitive, to the point that, like, it's pretty obvious that, like, the Pokemon Company noticed. And so entering Gen 7, the move was nerfed to 50% accuracy, significantly making it, like, a lot worse, right? It's still uncompetitive, but it's a lot worse, right? And then they made it so Smeargle couldn't run it, right? So, this is where it gets complicated. So, Smeargle can no longer run Dark Void. It fails when used by Smeargle. However, there was precedent that Dark Void was like broken and stupid. And so Dark Void was banned because back in this day and age, when that happened, like, I think a little bit less attention was being paid to, like, being, like, incredibly by the book on every little detail, right? Because there was clear precedent Dark Void was banned. Common sense this very clearly tells you that Dark Void should be banned. There's, like, no debate here at all. Darkrai is, like, not that good, and, like, it had already proven to be a stupid move on another Pokemon, to the point that even the Pokemon Company noticed and took it off of, like, the non-Darkrai Pokemon. They're not just going to delete the move because it's a signature move, but, like, if they had, it would have made this a lot better. So Gen 7 is fine, right? Dark Void is banned, Darkrai is legal, Darkrai is not good because Darkrai is not a good doubles Pokemon. Not generally. Like, it has some interesting traits and it would be fun to use it, but it's banned in SV because, okay, so Dark Void's no longer good. Smeargle can no longer use Dark Void. Darkrai is legal in SN. Everyone is happy. Great, we don't have to deal with Dark Void. However, Darkrai took a generation off. It was not in the decks in Gen 8. However, it was added back for Gen 9. So this was significant for a couple reasons. So, number one, we're in a new era where supposedly, I guess, this is what I gather, was not around Smogon before. At least this generation, Smogon tiering policy has been taken very literally, very seriously, and very stupidly by the book all the time. And so Darkrai came back with Dark Void, because of course they didn't delete Dark Void. They should have just deleted Dark Void. Smeargle can still not use Dark Void, etc. So, where does the controversy come in? So, Darkrai starts legal, Dark Void starts legal. Dark Void's not even like a good move, we think, right? Well, yes and no. So, DLC 1 also introduced a Pokemon called Diplin. Diplin was a very funny guy who, well, okay, I think the replays are probably dead, but like, because of the incident. But Diplin had an ability called Super Sweet Syrup, which lowered your evasiveness 1 time per battle. At first, we didn't realize it was 1 time per battle. And so that meant you could pair it with Darkrai, and Darkrai could click Dark Void. And it was broken, and it was done. And it was not Darkrai, it was entirely Dark Void. And everyone knew it was Dark Void. Darkrai was not doing anything other than Dark Void. But clearly something had to be banned, right? So we have the case of, again, 1 Pokemon in the game can use this move because Smeargle can no longer learn it because the move was broken, because the Pokemon Company knew it was broken. And, well, what does Smogon say, right? So, something needed to be banned. However, Smeargle no longer learns Dark Void, and it's complicated because DOU has a precedent for banning only Dark Void by itself, because that's what happened in Gen 7. However, that's not what happened here, and instead, Darkrai got banned. So, this was dumb. This brought everything back from the Commander debate, and inspired another thread in Policy Review, this time by another great doubles poster, Arctic Blast. And, well, it's very similar arguments to Tatsugiri. Like, Dark Void is unique in doubles because it hits both Pokemon. Singles doesn't have to worry about spread sleep because, well, sleep is a whole issue in singles to the point that's actually banned now completely. But spread sleep was obviously broken. This is mostly a doubles interaction. So, very stupid. However, Darkrai was banned. Most people, again, disagree with this, because everyone and their mother can see that Dark Void is the reason that Darkrai is broken. And it was banned before, when the situation was exactly the same, except for the context of the Smogon politics at the time, right? So, Darkrai was banned, this thread was made. Wait, what? Okay, never mind. Okay, so this had a whole thread. Again, the DOU cheerleaders were like the only 2 people in the entire community that thought a certain way about it, and no one could tell whether they actually thought that or whether that was just what they were being told to say by the higher ups on Smogon, right? Who would obviously like to see their cheering policy followed. And it would not, granted, it would not be great for DOU to fight against this, really. DOU has not really that much to gain and everything to lose from fighting against this kind of stupidity in terms of period policy, because at the end of the day, DOU has it pretty great, right? Has access to being in stuff like SCL, has our own trophy tour. There's a lot of benefits of being on Smogon, right? And that's great. So I can understand why you don't want to have controversy with tiering or whatever, but that doesn't mean we should just be happy with this nonsensical policy that is multiple times produced outcomes that the vast majority of the community is unhappy with and knows is not accurate to the way this format works, right? Darkrai is not a broken Pokemon in doubles. That's just a fact. It's not good. Like it's very frail. And it has coverage. That's it. But like the only reason it's banned is Dark Void. Everyone knows it. But the problem is the pretending that we don't know it. And that's what really irks me about this issue, right? And so we had this whole debate. And well, another Tyrion admin came in. Um, at least this Tyrion admin had played like DOU specifically at some point. Not that that's relevant. Actually, that's not even true. Like Shiloh has played BGC before. He knows what he's talking about. But like again, Tyrion policy, ban Darkrai, Dark Void, and this is just stupid. Like that is not the way it works. And you get into a whole back and forth on Tyrion policy. And basically nothing was like decided on. And this was stupid because we now have two things banned in the team builder. Tatsugiri is tagged Duber, Darkrai is tagged Duber, and this is just not accurate to the reality. And it's not even a case of like, oh, I really want to use these Pokemon, because really I don't. But the broader issue is, what are we going to do when this happens again? Because this happened 2 times this generation. I don't think the Pokemon Company is going to become like less interested in making like double specific interactions happen. They were clearly being experimental, I think, with like Commander. It was something they never really done before, like specific interaction that involved 2 specific Pokemon. And it was very powerful, and it's been a force in VGC, and I think they're likely to do it again. Whether or not it will be broken next time remains to be seen. Maybe they'll learn. They probably won't. But I think we're going to see this again. And so I really think we're going to get to it's just dumb. Like, we don't need to be banning this. There's a common sense solution. And I'd say this is different than singles because of just the nature of these interactions and being only doubles, right? Like, we can't just, these are both like not singles type of broken. When I say singles type of broken, I'm obviously being like a little bit too broad, but like singles type of broken to me is like, it's fast, it's strong, it outspeeds everything, and it wins games, because that's what a lot of them are. There's obviously some exceptions to this, but like fast offensive Pokemon are ultimately way better in singles than they are in doubles. It's a lot easier for them to be better and to be broken with singles. But this is completely different. Like, this is a different kind of broken. I think Smogon's training policy does a pretty good job of handling like the singles kind of broken, like the fast offensive Pokemon. And I could see the argument. Well, okay, like Cinderace has Pyro Ball. Let's ban Pyro Ball, and then like the Cinderace goes and uses Flare Blitz, and then like whatever, right? So you ban the Cinderace, not Pyro Ball. And Cinderace is the only thing that has Pyro Ball anyway, right? That type of thing. But like in this instance, we're talking about a different way of something being like ban worthy. We're talking about like impacting like the entire board state, like the things in doubles that are broken. Like you can have like stuff like Flutterbait or whatever, but like generally like bans and doubles tend to be like more metagame based. I'd say, okay, that's not true. Like that happens with both singles and doubles, but a lot of like the bans and doubles are less specifically because a Pokemon is fundamentally like too powerful for the format, right? It's often about like metagame conditions creating a point where a Pokemon is like a little bit too oppressive, right? Like Fluttermane banned day 1 in like singles, right? Fast, strong, great offensive typing, pretty broken. However, Fluttermane had a long and controversial history in DOU, but it was legal for a very long time, and we had like playable metagames with it in a way that you wouldn't really have if you had it legal in singles. But ultimately, like Fluttermane was still broken in doubles, and that's why it's banned, right? But well, it's more of what I'm getting at here is it's more a specific like result of the way the Pokemon fit into the metagame. It's a little bit too strong for the metagame, rather than the Pokemon itself being like fundamentally like too fast and too offensive, right? And I think there's a lot of bans in singles that kind of come down to fundamentally too fast, too offensive, or too many, or like, well, you add Terra and it just like fucks everything up for singles. I don't know enough to talk about it. But I think that environment of like the way things are typically broken in doubles makes a pretty big difference, right? Like, I think we should be able to look at Tatsugiri and be like, this enables another Pokemon, right? Or Dark Void. This, like, in the same way, it enables, like, another Pokemon, right? Like, it's putting both Pokemon to sleep and generating you 3 turns. Like, we should be able to look at these and be like, hey, like, this is something that is very clearly broken, and it doesn't really matter what has this element, right? Like, it doesn't matter that like, Tatsugiri is the only thing with Commander. Like, a phrase that was thrown around back when it was legal was like, hey, like, if Magikarp had Commander, I'd be using Magikarp Thundozo. Like, it doesn't fundamentally matter what Tatsugiri is doing. And then, like, in the case of Darkrai, it's like, well, Darkrai is... It doesn't really matter specifically that Darkrai is doing the Dark Voiding. Like, Smeargle was already proved to be like that, was broken doing that, and that's a Pokemon with like 200 BST or something, right? Like, I don't know. The Tatsugiri one is like, okay, this is like unique, and the reason I care about it is primarily because it could happen again. But with like Darkrai, it really felt like precedent in terms of Dark Void obviously being a broken doubles move was being like ignored for the sake of tiering policy, because we had Dark Void banned like multiple times, and yet this particular time we can't tell that it's Dark Void. Come on, that's just stupid. Like, I don't know. This is a whole video of just me yapping, but the whole reason this got brought up because it came up in DOU court, and Tio brought up, like, hence why I made this post, right? I'd like to bump this thread against it seems to not have a conclusive ending and ask if something could be changed to allow Pokemon like Darkrai and Basculegion M back into DOU. Those mods without Dark Void and Last Respects respectively would not be broken at all and would be very fun and healthy to use in DOU. From what I understand, the current tiering policy is not very flexible towards doubles. I sadly do not know exactly how this tiering policy works, and I do not want to make basic arguments. So I hope those who know it well are willing to speak up. For those in charge, be willing to... Yeah. See, this is like a lot later than the last post, which was like almost a year ago now. But this is why I made this video. Like, P.O. brought this up. And really, I think it's not too late, right? Like, I think we need to, like, take some action of this at some point to prevent, like, it from getting, like, more complicated in the future. Because, I think we're going to see more, like, specifically doubles, like, kind of interactions, and I think we're going to see some more of them be broken. And I think it's really sad that we have to, like, completely write off a Pokemon that has other uses. Like, it's not like it's completely useless, this guy. It has Storm Drain, it's a Dragon type. Like, it's a shame that this has to be banned for the sake of a specific ability that's doubles only. It has less to do with the Pokemon than with the Pokemon it's paired with to begin with. And, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, whole lot of yapping. But I think we need, like, some form of change to account for the fact that there's these interactions that are pretty easily it's pretty easy to determine that it's not the Pokemon using it that's the issue. It's the way the element is interacting with multiple Pokemon on the field at the same time. But yeah, okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Free Commander or ban Commander, free Tatsugiri, free Darkrai, ban Dark Void. The end. GG.